Now they're upstanding again. We touch the healing hands.
I took over Wexford back in October. We had been beaten in the last 2 successive championships by Offaly by around 13 points. So it was obvious to most that we were in a state of transition at very best. If you're manager of Wexford team, you normally veer between manic depression, the manic side of it, and the depressive side of it. We go from elation to great sadness. When people criticize a team, sometimes they personalize their criticisms, and that can be hurtful from the point of view of players. I personally am somewhat indifferent. Some reporters can be hurtful of players, both on television, on radio, and in the print media. Again, luckily, they're the exceptions. But you know, someone feels competent or feels it's okay to pass a comment about a player's appearance or about his physical condition. I think that's beyond the bounds of what amateur players should have to endure. And I think we should at all times remember that these players are not paid. And you know, the journalists make a living out of this. When the ball doesn't bounce right, I think we should confine the criticisms to hurling and to the hurling skills and not go beyond that.
This is the Frenchman in, Martin Byrne. He's come in for Larry Murphy.
The other people who have managed teams would be aware that Wexford got no breaks that day. And if you don't get breaks against the likes of Kilkenny, and they get the breaks, they'd wipe you out. They're a very, very good team. I feel the same with Limerick. Limerick got no breaks against Wexford. We got the breaks that day, and that's how we managed to beat them by a point.
He's disallowing it. Starting here on the left-hand side against McNamara. Dangerous ball in there.
I have to say I wasn't surprised. Now, if Limerick had beaten us by a point or two, that would have been acceptable. But there was no way we were going to be wiped out that day. The main difference that day, I could, you know, waffle on and say we were more skillful, but that's not the case. We were lucky on the day. It came down to luck.
Damien Fitzhenry, under a minute to play. His team behind, he strikes it and he gets it!
Damien Fitz has been known to do that in the past, and obviously it's not a facet of his game that we'd be advertising to the world at large. But Fitzy is quite capable of burying the ball at any time. Plays full forward for his club, one of the top scorers in Wexford hurling.
On the shot, and the referee's whistle sounds, it's all over, and Wexford have won as dramatic a game in the championship as you could witness.
99.9% of the Wexford supporters are wonderful, and I wasn't that worried really that they didn't come to support us against Limerick. We had played poorly against Kilkenny, and you pay a price for that. The 1% who cry into their beer and who want to bet on Wexford and then lose a bet, whether it's men or women, they don't really interest me. And I've news for them if any of them happen to be watching. They don't interest the players either. And all I would say is just remember we're amateurs. We're not being paid for the roles we play.
Here comes O'Mara once again. He's got support. Declan Ryan coming in, and there's a goal here. Surely!
Well, Tipperary are justifiably odds-on favourites. They're a very, very good hurling team. I know that Nicky English is very happy to have drawn Wexford. He was, you know, happy to have avoided Galway, and he could have been in a situation where he had to play Galway and Kilkenny. So Nicky would see us as a reasonably soft touch, and the statistics suggest that he'd be right in that, and that that the Tipperary people would be reading it right. I would hope that we will convert more than we did against Kilkenny, and if we don't, we're in trouble. We have to do that. Tipperary are unlikely to hand us a second bite of the cherry, so we have to hope that it goes right that day.
He was picked on the team of the century and retained his place for the team of the millennium. His medals bear witness to his greatness, but buried in Jimmy Doyle's past is the untold story of a famous cup and its shallow grave.
We all wanted to win the Junior Cup because it was a trophy where every county finalists were in. It was in the early 60s. We were told like that the Glen Rovers were putting up this tournament. What was involved was all the county champions. It was, I think, 6 club teams, county champions. At that time, each club team were as strong as each other, you know. But that's that was the tournament, like, and that Noonan Cup was going on for years and years. To win the Noonan Cup with all those teams was a big thing. And actually, I don't ever remember getting medals or. It was the honour of bringing the Noonan Cup back to your club. That's what kept the Noonan Cup going. My mother had died, God be with her, and when she was buried, about a week or two afterwards, I went into the house and I started searching around. And I went upstairs, and under her bed she had the cup in a box, and I suppose she was looking after it, minding it. And I brought it out, and I said, well, when I knew it was the Noonan Cup, I knew Glen Rovers owned the trophy. So I said I wasn't going to hold it. I said I'd give it back to Glen Rovers. So that's why I was so happy to give it back to the Glen. Well, I'd say the trophy must have been under the bed for at least, I suppose, 30 or 40 years. When I recovered the trophy, I looked under the base of the trophy, and my mother had Jim dials scraped on it. And I suppose she knew I didn't own the trophy, but I suppose she was hoping in them days like that we'd win it back and that she'd still see the name under the trophy. So there's a little bit of history attached to the trophy. I gave it to a chap, a Glen Rover chap that was coming in, and I told him I had it. And I went upstairs and I brought it down to him. And I told him that it's a Glen Rover trophy and I would like to return it to Glen Rovers.
Well, I basically got told that Jimmy had been looking for me to call over to the house. So I went over there anyway, and Jimmy arrived down with this cup. And you know, I was a bit taken back by the whole thing, and he said, read the cup, and it was the Dan Noonan Memorial Cup 1952 Glen Rovers. And I asked him the story about it. He went on to tell me about like the games between the Glen and Thurles Sarsfields themselves, you know, and like the friendships that they struck up over it, you know. And basically I had the cup for 3 days, you know, and it was a great feeling, like to have the cup that so many mighty men have held on days gone by. And I at that stage then I brought it back to the club and just presented it back to the club.
Must have been 62 or 65 was the ending of the Noonan Cup, because if it wasn't, we wouldn't have been winning it, and otherwise I wouldn't have had it. Many years have passed since those summer days. I didn't ever dream of winning the senior All-Ireland. I suppose to win your first All-Ireland is one of the biggest thrills. Everyone wants to win an All-Ireland medal, but I went on afterwards and won 5 more, which I have 6. I have 6 All-Ireland medals. You remember me when the western moves upon the fields of barley. All my trophies and medals are in Lana Park at the moment. I hope, like, that they'll be in Lana Park or in Thurles while I'm here. But as I say, when I pass on, that I'd like to have them in the museum in Croke Park.
The hurling at that stage in Wexford was on a bit of a high full that year, and I mean, we just sort of come out hitting the ground running, and we were totally on fire for it. It took Kilkenny totally by surprise because, I mean, we just hurled the ball very fast and very direct.
Fields all around, it's going to be a Wexford ball.
I remember going out to take a sideline cut about 40-45 yards out on the, we said they get the Cusick stand side of the pitch, and I mean, it's your opposite side from the way the ball will naturally curl for you, you know. And it went over, and I said to myself, geez, that's something that doesn't happen very often.
Story from the sideline.
That gives you a great little boost of confidence, you know. It just gives you a great little inner sort of in yourself. You go, yeah, that's something that's great, you know. And about 4 or 5 minutes later, there was one at the opposite side, about 50 yards out or 60 yards out under the Hogan stand. And I can't remember who was going out to take it, but I remember sprinting across the field and saying, no, leave it, I'm going to have a go ahead again. And the saying goes, lightning doesn't strike twice in the one place. But you could feel it, like, it's a feeling that you have or something. It just felt right, like, so I got it.
Scoring with 2 sideline cuts out of 3 points so far. Beautiful artistry, and it's 7 points to 1.
And then in the second half, there was another one out in front of the queues, let's say maybe 50, 60 yards again. And I went for it, and I went over. It's something that doesn't happen very often in big games. You don't really practice sideline cuts, but you usually get a bit of banter going, that you get 3 or 4 fellas to put a pound on it or 2 pound on it, like, and see who'll cut the most over out of 5, and you start at the 21 and work out to the 50, like, you know. I would put it down to the sod in Crow Park that day. There seemed to be a real cushion that day. I mean, when I put down the ball, you could feel it, like I was sitting up on the grass, like the very same as a golf tee. So you knew you were getting under with a 9-iron or something, or a wedge, like, you know. So you were going for it, like, you know. You never dominate a match for 70 minutes, like, so you just said, now try and ride the storm when it comes. And they got back, and we rode the storm, and we got back in, and we got a goal to go back up 3 or 4 points again. But they just worked and worked. And I suppose maybe we started watching the clock with the last minute or 2 to go. And we just lost possession. And it was one of the best points you'll ever see scored in Crow Park, that equalising point that Kilkenny got that year, you know.
Up to Evan Morrissey. It's got over the board. They're level. Morrissey's put it over the board. He scored 2 goals and 3 points. They've been level 5 times, and it's all over, and it goes to a replay.
And it wasn't even touched out, and the game was over, like, you know. And it was a chance that a rude miss, like, you know. It was we felt like that we had left it nearly behind us coming back up for the replay after having such a lead up against Kilkenny, because you don't get 2 bites of the cherry with them, you know. I remember probably one thing that crossed my mind afterwards. I went for one, and I probably would have been better off to keep the ball alive. It's great when they go over, but when they don't go over and they go wide, you're giving the goalkeeper a free puck to straighten at 90 yards up to your backs, like, you know. So I mean, after riding the luck 3 times, maybe I should have used my head a bit better and tried to lob the next one in, like, you know.
Lieutenants. Michael McNamara now trains Galway. So was the Scariff publican disappointed not to be asked to succeed Loughnane?
Well, I suppose I expected to be offered a job, but to say I'd be disappointed to be maybe putting it a bit too strongly. I had decided at the end of '99, had my views well known that I was finished with coach and training for the present. I had almost 12 years with various Clare teams, and I had a successful innings, and my innings was finished. You try and get away from it and maybe play a little golf and maybe spend a little time at the seaside or something like what we say normal people do, but it just calls you back. Noel Lane arrived at the doorstep and put it to me, would I consider getting involved with a Galway team? We would have to say a Galway team that looked, from the outside at least, as if they'd underachieved. And that challenge, my initial reaction was, of course, no, God, I haven't enough of problems without that one, but it kind of bit me over the weekend, and when you arrived back the following week, I said, it sounds like a wonderful thing to do, and here we are. I suppose there is a perception in Galway that maybe the whole thing is a little bit too nice and too gentle or too genteel, and that perception is there, which isn't quite true, by the way, but that perception is there, and maybe they felt that I might add a little bit to that. It was really a mental thing, and there was a mental block there, and by Sunday we'll know that mental block is still there about performing on big days, and in general terms, that was really my job, to get over that mental block. It's impossible to compare. Jeff, for all manners and means, was just another inter-county hurler who didn't achieve with Clare. Noel Lane, on the other hand, had played in, I can't know, maybe 8 All-Irelands and has won 3 or 4 medals, I'm not sure. So the comparison is strange. We had one who maybe underachieved and one who achieved the ultimate. But on a personal basis, Noel and I have been friendly long before he arrived with his proposal to me. And Ger and I had worked together for many years before success came. So I suppose if you don't work as a unit, a management team and a team, then you won't get the ultimate success.
Henry Shotland, Berrigan and goal again, stopped on the line, and it's in.
Anybody with aspirations to win an Ireland has to look at the incredible performance of Kilkenny as a team performance, unsurpassed certainly in the last number of years. This team are the ultimate. They have brought hurling to an all-time high between fitness, between levels of commitment and levels of skills, and they deserve to be complete and utter favourites. That's the reality of it.
Graham hand passing inside for Andy Bamford, going right through. Here's a chance for Kilkenny. A goal!
You just can't take your eye off the ball in Croke Park and All-Ireland semi-final for any reason, or for any period of time. If you do, you've had it. You're gone. If there was anything to be learned from that game, it was that you must stay hurling in for 35 and 35 minutes. And teams who expect to win All-Ireland, who expect to reach the ultimate, can't decide to hurl for 40 minutes and then take a break for 20 minutes, because at that stage the game is over. As a coach, it gives me a challenge to reach that plane and to bring players to that level of sheer skill which Kilkenny have. And if our training has gone as per schedule, then there's a reasonable chance we'll have a good cut of it.
No, it'll keep you on your toes, Ari.
In towards Declan Ryan, ready to cause havoc. A great save by Damien Fitzhenry.
Okay, full forward from the club. Yeah, well, it'll be a big difference, obviously, you know, and it's nice to have a change from playing in goal with Wexford the whole time, and then getting a chance for a run out the field with the club.
Looking up into the sky, getting it down into the stick. Another chance and another point.
We ended up getting a drubbing from Kilkenny, to be honest. But like the hardship that we got down in Wexford after that game, people telling us probably we were the worst team to come out of Wexford in years and all, actually spurred the lads on, and the lads trained hard from that time, and we came back and we gave a good performance against Limerick.
Good play by Damien Fitzhenry.
There'll be no one quicker to hold up your hand than myself, you know. When you come out there, when you get the chance to clear the ball, the place forward is up the field. I came out, probably dilly-dallied a small bit too long, ended up getting hooked by Brian Begley, and the ball ended up in the back of the net. You know, it's cardinal sin for that to happen to a goalkeeper. So luckily enough then, we ended up getting a penalty a few minutes later, and I ended up going up and putting it in the back of the net.
Fitzhenry striking and scoring! Rory McCarthy trying to run in, he's dragged down. It has to be a free in.
Well, I had known going up to take it that there was very little time left, you know, and when you get up and at a stage of the game like that, it's hit and hope, you know. If it goes in, great. If you miss it, you're the worst man in Wexford for the following week or months maybe.
Damien Fitzhenry, under a minute to play. His team behind, he strikes it. A second penalty goal.
It's a long way back, but you know, like the whole thing about it is when you get up and you score the way back. It seems like no length at all. It seems like, you know, 21 yards maybe. But if you miss it, I can be sure now that it is a long way back.
Dropping in there dangerously. Oh, and it's belted into the back of the net.
We were underdogs in the Tipperary game, all right, you know, and we went into it. And in fairness to everybody, they hassled and they blocked and they got in, and we knew going up ourselves that we were in with a good shout against Tipperary. And luckily enough, we didn't play really well in the first half. But we came back in the second half and done the business in the second half.
Here's Larry O'Gorman. Wexford needs something, and he provides it.
Larry O'Gorman, no better man to get him than the big Larry, you know. Brought up 2 goals, and you know, we were just happy enough to get those. The legal Larry O is a pure character, you know, and just after the match on Sunday there, we were in the players' bar, and a reporter came up to Larry and he asked Larry would he run him through his first goal, you know. And Larry took the microphone and he says, definitely goal of the year. Anyone that was at the game will realise that Martin is not finished yet, and he comes along and comes on. There's a roar that would deafen anybody that was at the game. And in fairness, you know, Martin would cause an upset to any player in the whole of Ireland when he comes on to Martin. In fairness to whoever drives him in training, you know, because he's gone a fair bit old for to drive himself, you know, the eyesight is not great with him. And, you know, in fairness, you know, he comes out on the crutches and heads out on the field. And, you know, it's nice of him to come back to us for a while, you know, before he heads into the retirement home.
Paul Cobb, back here, Mitch Jordan. Is that accurate? It is! It's over the bar! It's a draw here in the first of the Guinness Hurling semi-finals. Players exchanging shirts.
Tony is very much in the Liam Griffin mould, you know. He loves Wexford and he would do anything to see Wexford hurling prosper. If anybody had said to you this time last year, you know, that Wexford would be up there in the All-Ireland semi-final next year, and even at the start of this year, you know, people would probably laugh at him.
Best game last year, and the Galway team isn't that different.
Just a point.
Big surprise, I suppose, is the Dennis Byrne being dropped, but in fairness, he hasn't been going well all year. The club final went really badly for him, and he seems to just suffered ever since with his form. The Galway forward line is the best that Kilkenny will have met this year, certainly the most dangerous. The problem for Galway will be getting the ball into the forward line. The Galway midfield will struggle against Comerford and McAvoy, which is a really strong combination. And the Kilkenny half-forward line is really designed to close down the Galway half-backs, which would be the best source of ball really for their forwards. The other big problem for Galway will be closing down the Kilkenny full-forward line. Last year, Ollie Canning did really well against Charlie Carter, but it's very hard to see them stopping Carter, Carey and Shefflin, and you have to expect a Kilkenny victory.
Owen Kelly, and a very awkward angle.
For most of the first hour last Sunday, Tip Wexford kind of panned out the way everyone thought it would. That Tip were just in a different class, but they fell away really badly, gave away 2 goals which they'd be really cross about. And now, I mean, there's bound to be doubts in the Tip psyche at this stage. And Wexford, even though they haven't been playing that well, must be getting more confident. They've come through 2 really good matches against Limerick and Tip, and are still there in the championship. The problem they have is their forward line. In the last 2 games, their forward line has scored just 1-5 and 1-4 from play, which is unsustainable, really. They can't keep on getting away with that. I think Wexford will make it really hard for Tip on Saturday, and I think Tip have a lot of questions to answer. But you would have to still say that they have the class, they have the forwards, and even though Wexford will make it a real hard, dogged match, you can see Tip pulling through by 2 or 3 points.
This weekend, a Galway team faces an All-Ireland semi-final without Joe Cooney for the first time in 17 years. He remembers the early days.
The throw-in on the 98th All-Ireland.
There wasn't much in that game, you know. It could have gone anyway for most of it, you know, but I suppose they got 2 or 3 points at the finish that pulled them away. I suppose we weren't too disappointed about losing, but, you know, anytime you get to a final, you've got to take your chance, and we didn't that day, and that's how it went, you know.
And Peter Malloy was robbed at the last minute by the diving Jim Troy. The referee's whistle has gone, and the All-Ireland final of 85 has been won by the Midlanders of Offaly. And Joe Cooney, the scorer of all of Galway's points so far.
You know, I suppose we were a bit more mature than we had been the previous year, and we thought that we might get on a bit better, you know.
Forward marked by Paddy Prendergast.
John Fenton took a free. He was about 30 yards out, and I suppose from where we were standing, you could see that there may have been a small gap, and he was going to go for it. And I think, you know, at the time our backs weren't aware of that, I suppose, because being so early in the game, you didn't think he was going to do that. But any time John Fenton stands over a free, you have always to watch out.
Was expecting a point, including the Galway players, but it went high and over the goalkeeper. There's a little bit too much punching, but it comes to Joe Cooney, and Cooney.
We could have been doing an awful lot of hurling all through the games, but when it boiled down to the last maybe 10-15 minutes, we just really couldn't put them away, and they were always very good at getting goals, and I think against us they got a lot of goals.
Evan Hennessy, is there a goal on here? Yes!
No one wants to get beaten in 3 All-Irelands in a row, and we were certainly going to go out to not to let that happen. And I think playing Kilkenny in that final, you know, there was a lot of pressure on Galway at the time, so we went out with a fierce determination not to lose a 3rd final.
Switch down between Ger Henderson and Joe Cooney.
We had a lot of good physical hurlers at the time, and there were very good hurlers as well, you know, and I think we didn't really mind what way it came, but a lot of the players, you know, could suit any type of game, but that was a physical game, and it suited us on the day, you know.
And Mark, for a moment, that is. Can he steady himself sufficiently? Yes, and he's got the accuracy as well, and it's 4 points to 1. Tony Keady then, just outside his own 45-metre line. Turning it right in towards Linsky and Cooney.
All I remember of that was a high ball coming down, and I just went up to flick it on with one hand, you know. And Ger Henderson happened to be coming behind me, and he went up to catch it, and my hurling went down between his fingers, and it cut his fingers, a bad gash in his fingers. At the time, you know, I was just trying to pull out the ball, but I suppose other people saw it differently, and I had been talking to Ger Henderson many the time after that, and there was never a problem, you know.
Joe Cooney picking up that loose ball, converging on goal, looking for an insurance goal for Galway. Joe Cooney, hand pass to Ian O'Reilly to Noel Lane, the shot, save by Kevin Cooney, to goal!
There's always the thing about steps, you know, and some referees will let it go, and I mean, when the matches are going so fast, it's very hard to count steps, and I think I probably took 1 or 2 steps too many, but when you get away with it, it's great, you know. When you're pulled back, it's not too nice, but it worked out for us that day in '87, and I was delighted to, you know, I suppose, give the pass that finished up in a goal.
But the referee's whistle sounds, and it's Galway who are the new All-Ireland champions.
In '87, I got Hurler of the Year award. It's a lovely honour to get, and I suppose overall it's how your team gets on in the championship, and I think that's basically how I got it, because we had done well that year, and we had won most of the, you know, the finals, the Oireachtas, the League, the Railway Cup, and the All-Ireland.
The McCarthy Cup, Poshie Adol Dungallen.
Next week on Breaking Ball, Derry's 1993 collective painstaking